2022 has been a big year for our heroes in a half shell. First of all, we got Shredder's Revenge, and then Konami decided to release the ultimate package for Turtles fans, with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Cowabunga Collection. This is a collection of NES, SNES, Mega Drive and Game Boy games, plus loads of instruction manuals and supporting information, music and artwork. And if you're a fan of the Turtles or scrolling beat-em-ups, this is a collection not to be missed. Well, Konami hasn't really been on their A-game in the video game space for some time, but this is probably the best thing they've put out in years. Back in the 80s and the 90s, Konami's arcade games were legendary, with X-Men, The Simpsons, Gradius, and of course, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This collection is most likely going to cater for the nostalgic audience, those of us who lived through the 80s and the 90s playing games. And as soon as you boot up the game, you get a nice animated Turtles intro. Then you can dive into the collector's items, which include comic covers, music playlists for all the games, shots of the animated TV series, game manuals, and also, really impressively, loads of design documents from the original game. The sheer amount of stuff in here is pretty staggering, and a must-have for any Turtles fan. Well, let's get into the games. So we've got 13 games in total in the collection, which are made available in their North American and their Japanese versions. Now, even the game selection menu has gloss. It's a very nice comic book style selection screen showing you, what the game is before you play it. One of the killer features is related to the video mode, where you can choose to watch the games being played, and then at any moment you can dive into the action and pick up where the watch mode has got to. So that's really, really impressive stuff. As well as the presentation, there's various modes, including online co-op. Now, Konami have implemented rollback netcode for a seamless online experience. This is especially good when it comes to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters from the SNES. Each game has its various enhancements or old school cheats like invincibility, turbo, stage selection, and also other modes too. Well, let's have a look at the full game list then in the Cowabunga collection. So we've got the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game. We've got Turtles in Time, the arcade game. We've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES. Turtles 2, the arcade game, also on the NES. Turtles 3, the Manhattan Project, also on the NES. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters, also on the NES. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, that is on the Super Nintendo. We've got Tournament Fighters on the Super Nintendo. We've got the Hyperstone Heist on Sega Genesis. Tournament Fighters on Sega Genesis. Fall of the Foot Clan on the Game Boy, Back from the Sewers on the Game Boy. Finally, Radical Rescue, that one is also on the Game Boy. So going back to that original arcade game, it's not the best in terms of gameplay, but the nostalgia here is strongest for me. The gameplay is fairly simplistic, but that opening scene where you have to save April O'Neil from a burning building, well, that just gets me every time. Well, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Turtles in Time Arcade is up next, and mechanically, this one is much better, introducing features like throwing opponents into the screen, and the ability to tie up enemies with attacks, plus slightly more sophisticated jump attacks. The story is also richer here as well, as the four turtles travel through time, beating up the Foot Clan as they go. Well, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES is next, and this one was tough. This has the infamous Overground section, the top-down map, plus you switch between turtles rather than select who you want to play as. I distinctly remember getting this one on the NES when I was a kid, and being disappointed as it wasn't like the arcade game, but we would have to wait a little bit for that. Talking of which, Turtles 2, the arcade game on the NES. Now, this was the game I originally wanted the first time round, albeit with worse graphics than the true arcade version. My little kid brain at the time didn't really understand why there was a difference, but looking back, it is a miracle the developers managed to get anything like the original arcade game working on an 8-bit console. Well, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, the Manhattan Project on the NES, is another scrolling beat-em-up with new bosses and improvement to the graphics of the previous game. Now, I missed this one when I was younger, so it was good to go back and play it. It wasn't as engaging as the others, but that could be due to me not having nostalgia for it. Well, Turtles 4, Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo, well, that is one of the best SNES games I remember from my collection, and also it's a very close port to the arcade version, implementing the Mode 7 graphics back in the day for the screen-throwing technique. Bebop, Rocksteady and Super Shredder were also added to the port, which makes sense from a marketing point of view, but not really so much for the story. This was a great SNES game, but I do prefer Turtles in Time, the arcade version, which had much more of a Neo Geo feel to it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Hyperstone Heist, that's on the Sega Mega Drive. It's a similar game to Turtles in Time, albeit a little bit shorter, though it does have the new stages and bosses, and it takes inspiration and assets from the arcade version. So it is a mashup in all senses of the word. You can't really throw enemies into the screen on this one, which is one of the big features the game introduced, so that is a thumbs down from me, but again, I was a Nintendo kid. Well, next up we got Fall of the Foot Clan on the Game Boy, and that's the first Game Boy game in the collection, and it is impressive what they did on such a limited system. It's a scrolling beat-em-up, but it feels very much like first generation Game Boy game. Then we've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Back from the Sewers. That feels even worse, to be honest, which is odd because it's a sequel, although it does add different types of levels like skateboarding and like emulating Turtles in Time, and also the more recent Shredder's Revenge. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 Radical Rescue, that is much more of a maze-like game where you have to save your fellow turtles. It's a completely different experience from the other games. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters on the Super Nintendo, that one is a Street Fighter 2 clone and was looking to cash in on the popularity of the Turtles, as well as the fighting game genre back then. So in 1992 and 1993, fighting games were some of the biggest games on the market, like Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat, and Tournament Fighters tried to muscle in on the action. Each character has a bunch of special moves, and it plays how you'd want this sort of game to play. It's also really, really hard. There's also Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters on the Sega Mega Drive. That isn't so good, and that version chugs along rather than the smooth nature of the SNES game. Then we got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters on the NES. That one really shouldn't be on an 8-bit system, so while it's possible to do it, that doesn't mean you should do it. It would be good fun if nothing else was available, but unfortunately for this game, there's 12 other options. It's not for me, but I'm sure someone could appreciate it. Overall, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Cowabunga Collection is the ultimate collection of TMNT games. I thought having Shredder's Revenge released this year was a treat, but this collection is almost unbelievable as a Turtles fan. I played roughly half of these games back in the day when I was a kid, mainly the scrolling beat-em-ups either on the NES, the SNES, the Game Boy or the arcade. I didn't really play the fighting game clones, so it was good to check those out. So as well as the games, you've got all the music, the artwork, the manuals and more. So Konami really has outdone itself, and I haven't said that for many years. In terms of this package, I 100% recommend it. Well, the game was developed by Digital Eclipse, it was published by Konami, it's available on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PC, Xbox Series S and X, also the PlayStation 5. Originally it was released on the 30th of August 2022. I'd really like to thank the publisher for offering a review copy of the game. Well, that is it for now for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Cowabunga Collection. Really, really good stuff, and you want to dive into nostalgia, this is the perfect way to do it with a Heroes in a Half Shell. Well, that is it for now for the Cowabunga Collection, and as always, thank you so much for watching or listening. Hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. Or you can check me out on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. But if you enjoyed this video, found it useful, liking and sharing the video would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the other videos on the channel. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you soon.